Well, good afternoon, evening, whatever it may be. Today I'm going to show you how to pump water. We're going to start from inside the truck and walk through kind of the whole process of flowing water. Now, as anyone who's ever been around an engine when they're flowing water knows, it's really, really loud. So we're not going to actually, start the engine, run water, flow water, because you wouldn't be able to hear anything I'm saying. But we'll be good enough in this video because, unlike the last video where I went over the basic gauges and stuff, this truck's a lot more complete. It actually flows water, and it'll be a lot nicer to try and explain this than the other truck. So, first up, pull on scene, stop at a hydrant, lay out LDH, do whatever you're going to do. You get the truck parked in the appropriate spot, you're going to put the truck in pump. So you normally be in drive, you stop, put your foot on the brake, switch to neutral. You'd wait for your engine to idle down, get to idle speed, then you'd flip your pump shift. This is an older truck, so it's in here. You'd flip this up, flip the toggle, the light would change, do OK to shift. Then I'd shift it back into drive, the light would turn green. I'm good to pump. Newer trucks are similar, but they usually have a little black lever with a yellow collar, where you same process, except instead of a little toggle switch, you just pull it, flip it down, and then continue on from that point. So then you get out 3 points of contact, which I can't do because I'm holding the camera and other stuff, but we'll run with it. You'd put your tire chocks in place. Then you'd come up or go to wherever your pump panel is. This is a top mount, there's side mounts and cab mounts, but this is what we got to work with. So for the sake of this talk, we're going to have a hydrant we're working off of. Because we're not flowing water, we're going to have to do some imagining, but that's what the marker's for. So let's say we start with tank water. What are we going to flow? I got the pump chart that came with this truck. It's a really old one because it still has, 2-inch and 1.5-inch hand lines on it. But I looked it over. I think we can make a case for our little pretend scenario here. So if you have, regardless of wet pump or dry pump, you would pull your tank to pump to get water from your onboard tank into your pump. You may or may not need to pull your primer, get any air out of the system, but we're just going to run with, you just give it a pull, make sure all the air is out. Let's say the crew immediately pulls while they're hooking up the hydrant. Why not? A 1 3/4 smooth bore. Let's run with one of those. Let's say they pull, it's a cross lay, so cross lays on here 200 feet. Let's say we're doing the 7/8, we're doing this one right here, 150 gallons, 7/8. We'd need 120 PSI on our cross lay, our smoothbore cross lay. So up here, this is my intake. Water coming in the truck, water going out of the truck. Wait a minute, nope, switch those. Vacuum, pressure. So this is what I'm putting out of the truck. This is what I'm getting into the truck. So here, right now I'm at 0. Oops, getting confused here. Different gauges. I'm at 0 right now because I'm on tank water. I'm not sucking out of a pond or a dry hydrant through a hard suction, so it's not negative. And I'm not getting any hydrant pressure, so this would be at 0. Right now this is at 0 because we're not flowing any water. We determined I need 120 on my cross lay. We're going to call it cross lay 2. So first off, 110, 120. I want to get, right there with my pressure on here. So this is my throttle. I throttled this up to where I'm getting out 120. Because right now I'm running one cross lay. 120, crack slowly, charge my line when they're ready, get this to 120. Sweet. Now we're flowing water out of our smoothbore crosslight. Now let's say running low on water, hydrant's ready. I say open up the hydrant, give them the hand signal. This is where it gets interesting, because let's say I got a whatever hydrant that's got 50 psi for the sake of this talk. So now instead of 0, I'm now getting 50 psi into the truck from the hydrant. That compounds the 120 I'd be flowing here, because I went from having 0, then I charged it to 120, now I'm getting 50, so that'd bump it up to 170. So I'd have to throttle down a little bit to maintain the right pressure, because now I'm getting that extra 50 in from the hydrant. Now let's say they pull off the rear of the truck a 2.5 with a fog nozzle. They wanted that one a bit longer. 2.5, 150, fog. They pull 250 feet. So now it's going to be 125. Now we have an issue. I started running just a 120, and now I got to get a 125. Now that's not that big of a difference, but we'll run with that first. We'll add another one here in a bit. So they want the 2.5 charged. I can open this all the way, crack it nice and easy. When they're ready, open it all the way. I may have to adjust, but I should be still right around that 120 on both of these. So, generally speaking, you could probably get away with that. But I want this one just a little bit more than this one. And in a perfect world, I'd just throttle up a little bit to get this number to 125, 130. In my original one, I'd just close just a little bit, gate it back, so it's still at the 120. Now, here's a really good example. 100-foot smoothbore. We're going to run this one right now. One more hose line. 60. That's a big difference. Because we're running, 125, 120 for 2 previous lines. Now they want the 60 psi smoothbore. They connect it to outlet 4. Why not? I want to get that one only up to... Ooh, this gauge is off. I'll switch over here because that gauges it off. 60, so right? When they were ready, tell me to charge the line. I'd only crack that maybe halfway. If I were to crack it all the way, I'd jack them up to 125, but I don't want to do that. They only need 60, so I'd park it right about there. Now I'm flowing my hand lines. I'm happy. Now I want to fill my tank from the hydrant water. Because, again, we started this without a hydrant, so our tank's, half full, let's say. Now, I can just come over here and just crack that, quarter, half. Just let that kind of fill up over time. I don't need to fill it, crank it open. I still want to feed my hand lines, but I can steal a little bit to fill my tank. So, yes, it looks complicated, but really it's all a game of kind of balancing pressure. It makes a little more sense when you're actually doing it, but on the downside, you couldn't hear anything I was saying if we were actually doing it. So before I end this, now that we've kind of done the rough run through, kind of the principle behind it, with a nicer, better conditioned truck, I'm just kind of glancing out of the corner of my eye if there's anything particular about this truck that's worthy of mention. Oh, sure. Primer. Just last week, I watched a department burn out a primer, like smoke was coming out from under their truck. This is essentially like a little starter motor on a car. You can hit it for maybe 5-10 seconds, but then you want to give it a break. Because if you just lay on it and just keep pulling on it and hammering on it, you'll burn out primers. And then you're in a world of hurt. Yeah, here we go. Another point. In our example, we were on a, hydrant at 50. If you're pulling out of a pond or a dry hydrant, you'd be down here in a vacuum because you're using your pump to pull up out of a pond, like thinking like you're sucking soda or something out of a straw. That's what drafting is. So that's where you'd get, a negative number on an intake. Actually, while we're here, another point on intakes. The city doesn't like it if you collapse water mains. So if you start out here and you're really, really flowing water, you can start to suck more water out of a hydrant than the hydrant can give you. Which is why you always want to leave, maybe 10 PSI as a reserve. So if I'm flowing a lot of water and I look up and I'm sitting right about here, I'm not at zero, but I'm getting down there, and people want, another hand line or a deck gun or whatever else. I may not be able to give it to them because you don't want to collapse a hydrant. And it can get to the point where your hard suck or your soft suction, your LDH, can be squishy. You can kind of put your foot on it and squish it down, and that's kind of riding the line there a little bit, but just one of those things to keep an eye on. If you're working off a hydrant, you still don't have unlimited water. Pressure relief, a little bit here, not a lot. Basically, this is so you can protect the pump. Where if you're being fed by an engine and they have a big water hammer come through, you can set this at, like, let's say 70 for your intake, your relief valve, and if a big 100 psi water hammer comes in, this will kick on and then bleed off the pressure and keep from beating up a pump or bursting hose lines or whatever bad things may come down the line from that. Other than that, I can't think of anything really worth mentioning here with this video. Oh, well, I guess I can do one more thing. So the fire's out. We've flown all our water. We've filled up our tank. Now we're ready to shut down. I'd close my hand lines when people were ready. Hand line, hand line, hand lines. So I'd close all my hand lines. Now they can tear down hose lines, walk out hose, roll up, whatever. Fill up my tank, make sure my tank's filled. I can close that. I'm still at, 120. I can throttle down, return truck to idle. And then when that's done, I can, call for them to shut down the hydrant. The tank's full, I can close everything. So I've closed everything, taken everything to idle. People are breaking down hoses, doing whatever. Next thing I could do is, if it's, freezing cold middle of winter, or just as good practice, open my drains, drain out any standing water in them. And in the winter, especially up here in Wisconsin where it's cold, pull my pump drain so you don't freeze and break pump lines and stuff. Next thing I could do is, if we're ready to go already, pull my chocks. If not, leave the chocks out while we're still cleaning up. And to keep from chewing up a pump and burning it out, now that we're just sitting here not flowing water, you don't want to burn out a pump. You can come back in the truck, and again, you're going to put your foot on the brake, make sure the truck comes to idle. Some trucks, because you're in drive, make sure that your speedometer drops to 0, maybe 5, 10, whatever, while you're in pump. And everything zeroes out, back to neutral, disengage pump, back to neutral, still in neutral, or drive if you're ready to go. and then you can go. So that's the tearing down process. One additional little asterisk side note. Again, I'm pretty sure I talked about this with the other truck, but that other truck was a very sad piece of worn out, beat up machine. Does this truck even have one? Tank to pump? Tank fill? Huh. Inlet? That's odd. I was going to say, well, I can still say it. Modern trucks will have a recirc line. Actually, I believe on this truck it's old enough where the tank fill and the recirculation line may be the same thing. If it's July and you're doing, mop up where you flow 20 gallons and then they shut the hose line down and you're sitting at 0 gallons for 10, 15, 20 minutes, you don't want to overheat your pump, burn up your pump, start boiling water in your pump. It can happen. So all you would do is crack your recirc line or your fill, which not really the same thing. A recirculation line doesn't add any more water to the truck. For example, if I'm hooked up to a hydrant and I just open the recirculation line, I'm not going to take any more water from that hydrant. So it's just feeding water from the pump into the tank and just kind of very slowly heating the tank water. But that's 1,000 gallons in that tank, so it'll take a long time to do any damage to that. A fill line actually takes water, into the truck. So actually last week, that same call where they burnt out a primer on another engine, the truck I was on had a fill and recirc line all on the same valve. So I had to be very careful with it because when I wanted to cool the pump, I'd open it, and yes, I'm cooling the pump, but the tank was full, and now I'm spilling water on the grill because I'm taking in more water. So one of those things where sometimes they're combined, it's not great. If they're separate, sweet, but it is what it is. Other than that, thank you for watching. If there's anything else you'd like to see, let me know in the comments.